Hi, so my name is Sylvia Theuri, and I am the curator for 13 Ways of Looking, which is an exhibition which will be opening at the Herbert Gallery on the 2nd of October. And I'm really excited today to be joined by one of the exhibiting artists, Andreana Fatta. Andreana, I'll hand over to you if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone. I'm one of the exhibiting artists. I'm a Cypriot heritage, so my practice is more research based, and it's on about my Cypriot background and my displacement, and I activate these things through archives, expressing colonisation, wars, lost histories, and identities. Yeah.
Brilliant, thanks, Andreana. So I've got a few questions that I'm going to ask you. Start with the first one, which is, what was the last exhibition you went to, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
So the last exhibition before the kind of global pandemic was the Venice Biennale, and that was one of the best art experiences of my life, seeing kind of a melting pot of so many artists and from all over the world, kind of showing their talents. And the title of the exhibition was May You Live in Interesting Times, which reflects, I think, on today as well, pretty nicely. It was one of my favorite experiences of going to visit an exhibition, in terms of the mass scale of things, and also to see an artist such as Haris Epaminondas, which influenced my practice for this current exhibition, which is quite exciting to see.
Oh, brilliant. It's great to hear about an exhibition that you last went to, and I think with everything that's been happening, we're kind of looking back at like times before all this, and times that we enjoyed, and so it's good to hear about an exhibition that's kind of stayed with you as quite a strong memory. And also you've talked about how some of those artists have influenced the work you're making. So we're going to move on to also now asking you, can you tell us a bit more about why engaging with your family archive is such a key element of your practice?
Yeah, so as someone who's moved to the UK in 2011, you kind of have this support network of family, and you always kind of share stories, and Cypriots are really good storytellers. So, I have so much experience also from my grandmother telling me all these stories, because she was someone who's been displaced from her hometown in Cyprus due to war in 1974. So she would come up, with all these memories, which I found so fascinating. And working with, the people that are this close to you, and having access to materials, it's quite interesting kind of perspective, where how can one person preserve these items and materials, but also to kind of share it with people that might not know much about Cyprus, or the history of Cyprus. And Cypriots as a whole, we're quite a small population, only 1 million on the island. So in 1974 and before, there was a big flock of Cypriots to the UK, along with Australia and America, because of the war. So I think working with my family and kind of showing these archived things, other people can connect with the materials and these stories in some little ways. And I think it's quite an important thing to do and to work with.
Yeah, that's great. I think, it's I guess you can see that your family, you're really connected to them, and to be able to share some of what they've collected over the years is is great, and it's good that you're able to kind of share that with your audience as well. And moving on, in regards to the title of your work for this exhibition, which is An Endless Conversation. Can you tell us where the title comes from and what does it mean?
Yeah, so basically, the title An Endless Conversation, and also in Greek, Mia de Yodi Synomilia, comes from my experience of obviously, you know, living in Cyprus, and in a Cypriot household, you always kind of switch to the news, and you always have this kind of discourse and negotiations because the island is split in, it's been divided for now 46 years. So always on the news, there's these negotiations about a solution, and, you know, some kind of ironic remark, or someone who's a bit more pessimistic going, oh, you know, it's just an old story, just never ends kind of thing. So I think that's where initially the title came from, is my experience of growing up with that kind of term and mentality of, you know, a conversation between two sides that just keep going and going without, you know, any solutions at the moment. But at the same time, I'm taking it in a more optimistic way where, you know, an endless conversation doesn't have to be necessarily negative. So it's open for discussion, for kind of room to grow. And it is important, I feel, you know, to have a conversation with people around you to come up with solutions, or even if it's like storytelling or just sharing with people. And that's where my title kind of comes from.
Oh, great. I think it's quite an intriguing title, so it's good that you can kind of unpack that a little bit. Just in relation to this question, you've talked about the island being divided. Perhaps for people in the audience who might not know what that means, could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so basically just a little history lesson on Cyprus. Cyprus used to be ex-colony, so we used to be known as British Cyprus. And in 1960, we got our independence. And from then on, there was always some kind of intercommunal violence between the Turkish-speaking Cypriots and Greek-speaking Cypriots. That was kind of caused, like underlying problems that were caused by colonialism. And so the build-up of this kind of introduced the United Nations to safeguard and create a line where peace would kind of be restored, so it wouldn't end up to be the division it is today. But unfortunately, in 1974, the Turkish army invaded Cyprus. So that's why, you know, it's a divided island. The capital of the island, Lefkosia or Nicosia, is the only divided capital in the world. So it is quite a big kind of deal, I think, to talk about it. And, you know, it's an important thing for people to know that it exists. So that's where the island division comes from.
Oh, great, thank you. Yeah, sort of unpacking that for us a little bit. And as people go and see your work and go to the exhibition, they'll kind of be able to find out a little bit more about what you've just shared with us now. And you know, you've talked to us a lot about you know, your background, where you're from, you know, your Cypriot heritage being such a key part, and your family being such a key part to your work and to your practice. But at the moment, you're, you know, living away from your family in Italy, and so just another question for me would be, working in another country during the pandemic, you know, how has this affected your practice?
It has been a bit of a shock to my artistic practice, in the sense of I'm a very hands-on type of person, where I like to feel materials. I like to kind of play around with compositions and how things look, and just glue things together, or I don't know, saw it apart. But it has been quite challenging in the sense of being in another country where you don't really speak the language too well. So it's the sense of communication has been a big challenge for me, and also how to receive materials for this exhibition, because the initial plan was to go back to the UK and progress and build an installation, but that obviously changed with the pandemic. So it has affected my practice in the sense of going from the physical to more of a digital sense. So all my materials that I've been archiving from Italy have been sent to me from family members. So I've been receiving photos and video footage of dating back to 1981. So it has shifted my art practice in the sense of I can't, physically touch these materials. It's like copper or wax, but I have to kind of find a solution to incorporate these things more in a digital sense.
Yeah, I think it has proved to be quite a challenging time for many reasons, and I think having to change from being so hands-on to working completely digitally, I think that's a massive shift in your work and in your practice. And how, in terms of how moving forward, has it changed your practice going forward, do you think? Is this way of working something that you would continue, or would you like to maybe go back to how you worked before, or combining the two?
Yeah, so I definitely think it has changed. It shapes my practice for the better, in the sense of I've introduced this digital element, and there's so much more to explore in this sense, which I think adds value to my archival way of working. So definitely, I think it's a matter of reverting back to physical mixed with some digital, and kind of having a big array of material and platforms to show it on, for sure.
Great. Yes, I think also you've talked about the change in your practice in terms of having to go from working tangibly with materials to working in the digital realm solely for this exhibition. But then also there's the collaboration with your family, which I think you've highlighted there, like this back and forth of dialogue. Would you say that that's something that you were doing previously, or has that been that dialogue and back and forth of collecting information and sending it to you? Is that something that's been more recent, do you think, because of how things have changed?
Definitely, this is more of a kind of recent element, and quite an interesting one, in the sense of every family member would send me something that they would relate to more. So I saw a kind of trend of, I don't know, for example, my uncle would send me more photos of just him back in the day, or so it is quite interesting to have this as element of who you're kind of having this dialogue with, and what materials they would present to you, which is quite an interesting thing. And I think I would consider it to be a good element, in the sense of there's certain materials I would never have seen unless it came from that specific person. So I'm very open to kind of talking more and being less hands-on with the actual material that I get, and kind of just allow it to come to me in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. There's kind of like a sense of having to let go of the control a bit, and
Yeah,
kind of
it's
work
quite
with
hard.
what people present you. But so I guess at the same time it just draws out different stories from people, doesn't it? Yeah,
Definitely, yeah.
which is great. And so where do you see your work going next?
Well, I think for the future, I'm still kind of on the subject of archiving, and on Cyprus, I still feel like there's a lot of room and so many more conversations or narratives that I would like to present and kind of create in the UK, because in the West Midlands there is a large community of Cypriot, so I think it is interesting and to expand in the sense of presenting my artworks in different Cypriot environments of the UK and kind of see where that goes. So using archive, but having the input of more of the UK experience of being a Cypriot. And I think maybe through digitally as well, now that's kind of another element I have, and to use that to form another kind of conversation and narrate it somewhere else.
That's really interesting and exciting to kind of see where you want the work to move. And I think in your text, you've kind of talked about this Cypriot collective memory. So it seems to me like you're just kind of growing that Cypriot collective memory by thinking about going forward, maybe moving out to work beyond your family domain, but outside with the wider Cypriot community. So it'll be exciting to see what happens as you continue to develop that project. And so now we're down to my last question for you, which is, what would you want the audience to come away with after viewing your work?
So there's quite a few layers that I want the audience to try and understand, but I think the main thing is that I kind of want them to have a sense of Cyprus, to kind of walk away and having seen the colours of Cyprus, hear the sounds of Cyprus, see actual physical measurements that were taken from certain situations from the UN buffer zone, in my case, and kind of get them to think about what this material means and what these images mean. And I kind of want them to learn a little bit, in the sense of I've left some Cypriot words in my transcripts, and the sounds that they'll hear in the physical exhibition space. So I kind of want them to feel the sense of hospitality, and something where you won't necessarily get from just seeing Cypriots in the UK, taking it back to the roots and seeing and questioning, why are there borders? Why is this material being shown and not something happier, or just questioning in general? That's what I would like the audience to get from seeing my work.
That's great. Thank you, Andreana. It's been really interesting talking to you and hearing more about your practice and your experiences. And, I hope the audience also gain a lot from this. And if they haven't seen the work, get down to the exhibition and see the work in the flesh, as well as engaging with it in the digital space. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.